All right, so we want to talk a little bit about converting between types of numbers. We know we can represent numbers in different ways, either as fractions or decimals or several other ways. And so what we want to work on today is going between two of those types, and specifically going from fractions and turning them into decimals. Now, the key to this is remembering that fractions are division problems. Fractions are division problems because this is what's going to allow us to convert this into a decimal. So what I can do is I can turn this fraction into the division problem that it really is. Now remember, we've talked about how my numerator, or in our story that we talked about, if you've heard us talk about Nacho and his donkey, our numerator goes inside the house and our denominator goes outside the house, right? So we have our inside on top and our outside on bottom. So now once I have this set, I can do my division to find out what this is. Well, I know that 8 goes into 7 0 times because it's too big, right? So that gives me a 0, and now I can subtract from my 7. But now, instead of doing remainder like we have in the past, we had our decimal and then 3 zeros. The reason I add those 3 zeros is it's going to give me numbers that I can drop down as I continue my long division. So now I say, all right, I float my decimal up, I can't forget that, and I bring down my 0. So I say, how many times does 8 go into 70? Well, I know 8 times 9 is 72, so 8 times 8 is going to give me 64. 8 and 8 go on a date, come back is 64. And that subtract 4 is 60. Or 6, and I bring down my 0. Now I have 60. 8 goes into 60. Well, I know 8 times 7 is 56. So there we go. And now I can continue working on this. Let me zoom in right here. I subtract that, and I get a 4. I bring down my 0. So now it becomes 40. And now I know 8 goes into 40 a nice even 5 times. So that zeroes out at the bottom because I can do 40 and subtract, and I get 0. So I know for sure that I'm finished. So now that I've divided out, I can see right here that 7/8 is the same thing as 875 thousandths, right? So it's just a division problem. We do the division, we get the decimal. What if we come into an example like this, where we have a mixed number? You could do this by converting it to an improper fraction and then dividing like we did before, but I can also just set this 2 off to the side and work only with my fraction. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. I'm going to put my 2 and then my decimal point because I know I'm going to come back to that. And then I'm going to treat this fraction like the division problem he really is. I'm going to make my house, put my 4 on the inside, or excuse me, not my 4 on the inside, my 1 on the inside, because my top number or my numerator is what goes inside the house. So my 1 on the inside and my 4 on the outside. Now, I know that 4 goes into 1 0 times for 0, so I subtract, gives me a 1. And now remember, instead of a remainder, we add our decimal and 3 zeros. So I bring that down. I know 4 goes into 10 2 times for 8. I subtract that with 2 left over. I bring down my 0. 4 goes into 20 5 times for a nice even 20. And when I subtract that, I get 0, so I am done. And I didn't even need that last 0. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my decimal and I'm going to add it on to my 2. I already know I have a whole number 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw on my 25 right here. So essentially what I did, just so you can see off to the side, is I took my 2 and I added my 25 hundredths to that. And that's how I got the 2 and 25 hundredths that we see right here. And so that is how we can go from a mixed number into a decimal as well.